Excellent. Are you ready for a little French exercise? How is everybody feeling after this amazing food, speech, company, and wine? Good? So in the old tradition of Burgundy, very kindly Adam Strum alluded to a little exercise which dates as far back as the 11th century. I would like everybody to get the blood vessels to move and to get a little bit of excitement in their body, as I will tell you a little bit of a story. But I would like everybody to put their hands up. This is a traditional, historical Chevalier du Tastevin de Bourgogne. So I know there's many of you who know what I'm talking about. So everybody in the room, hands up, please. This is not a hold-up. You put your wallet on the left side. This is collection for the American Foundation. Hands up. 1, 2, 3. La 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 l'air. La 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 la. La 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 l'air. La 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 la. Woo! I'm afraid most of you know a lot about our Brotherhood of Burgundy. So, what to say after the amazing words of Charles and Adam, except, of course, the privilege to really be with all of us tonight, because this evening really represents what we're all about as friends, partners, and culturally together to create the best. And I really think the words of Charles and what he represents professionally as leading the foundation is fantastic. When I first met Charles, I had the pleasure to discover his background, and he was one of the men part of the Marshall Plan, at least the organization who really helped all of us as France and Europe to recover, which was fantastic. But beyond that, he obviously married an incredible lady and had a 1-year-old. So who could represent better the Franco-American friendship than Charles? Now, Adam and Sybil together represented American entrepreneurship. I had the pleasure to meet them 20 years ago, and believe it or not, they started their business over 30 years ago together in their kitchen as American entrepreneur in love of France, in love of the French culture, creating the Wine Enthusiast catalog and magazine, and representing the French culture in the United States. And I'm so, so proud that Adam today accepted to obviously be with us tonight, because the wine world would never be the same obviously without the presence of Adam and Sybil Strums with us, who sold the first few thousand corkscrews in the United States. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, can we applaud their contribution to the French culture in the US? Beyond everything, Adam played a key role in my life. I was one of those bachelors who loved life, of course, in wine. When you say you make wine, you get a big audience very quickly. 10 years ago tonight, almost, Adam very kindly at the Vinexpo, which is one of the largest convention of wine in the world, in Bordeaux, in a neutral territory, he was very kind to take me around and said, Jean-Charles, you love America, you got to meet some American winemakers. And very fortunately, Adam, in a round table like tonight, introduced me to my wife today, Gina, and when I saw those blue eyes, I fell, and I live the Franco-American coup de foudre. So to my beautiful wife, who accepted, obviously, to take my hand and give birth to our twins, thank you, my love. Adam, 10 years ago. It's fantastic, obviously, to be with all of you, because my family, very fortunately, and very kindly gave us, my sister and I, extremely early on in American spirits. You need to place where we're from into the geography of France. We're from Burgundy and Vougeot, a tiny village where there's less inhabitants in that village than the amount of people tonight in this room. 176 people naturally, invaded into the Second World War and naturally very close together. And I was very fortunate to be born really with a true American spirits in mind. I was born in 1969. We're celebrating a few 69 years birthday tonight, as we heard. And it was fundamental because as I was born, my parents, who loved America and who were obviously extremely supportive of the Man on the Moon, bought their first black and white television. And in that time, I will never forget, a few years later, the incredible influence of my grandparents into my personal friendship with the United States. And I speak with emotion naturally because my grandparents, who we're celebrating 100 years in a few weeks, and 96 years old in a few weeks, lived a variety of conflicts in this world, and among them one which was extremely moving. My grandmother was born, she lost her dad 2 days into the First World War. 5 days later, way back from the United States, came a telegram, very luckily in that small town of Langres in Burgundy, and a journal from Ohio saying, we are supporting French families who are in need, and here is $1. She was very fortunately educated with her sister thanks to American support. Years later, my grandparents on both sides, school teachers, naturally enter the conflict we had to live in, escaped camps, entered the resistance, and celebrated the incredible victory with American soldiers. So we lived, my sister and I, in this incredible environment of friendship with the United States, and I cannot forget the moments as a tradition in French families, and I'm sure many of you lived it. Sundays is the family dinner. And I will never forget my grandparents, I'm 6 years old, telling me, what are you doing in Burgundy? You should be in the United States. Me retorting, it's a little early maybe in life, 6 years old. But very fortunately, they instill in us this American way of life, this American dream, where at 11 years old, very kindly, as history teachers and school teachers of small villages, they took us to California, to the Golden State. They took us to the land which all of you know as represent the ultimate dream of any entrepreneur, any pioneer, any person who wants to go beyond. So we toured Southern California, we went to Monterey and looked at the historical capital under Mexican ownership. We went to San Francisco. We did all the missions, which was phenomenal and fascinating, till the moment we hit the Golden Gate Bridge. And my grandmother says, well, we got to see what triggered the independence to California and the small town, Sonoma County. We arrive there, we visit the mission, we read the history of 1846, and then suddenly we go into the corner of that famous square and we look at the Burr Flag Republic. And we see a little sign, Buena Vista Winery. Wow. We've been born making wine. I know it sounds very strange, but very fortunately, the winery was below my bedroom. So my sister and I made wine since pretty much 4 or 5 years old. So my grandmother, who was not a big wine drinker, said, well, in honor of your parents, in honor of the future, you got to visit that winery. It says First California Winery. We took the car, drove about 20 miles an hour, nearly got stopped and pulled over because we were driving so slow, afraid of missing it. And we arrived into this historical building. And I felt something which I had never felt ever before, which was really a vision of Europe into a country I had no idea was already making fantastic wine. Founded in 1857, first gravity flow winery, an historical building, the first of the first making champagne method wine. We went back to our small hotel. We couldn't taste. I was 11, my sister was 15. My grandmother took out of cellophane in the small hotel room we were sharing the plastic glasses. She poured 3 Chardonnays. We tasted it, and I pinched my sister and say, wouldn't it be fun one day to possibly come back to California and make wine? Now, that represents a key moment of my life and a key moment, obviously, of Franco-American friendship, because very fortunately tonight you tasted Buena Vista, which 32 years later, precisely, we had the pleasure to acquire and lead and really represent the history of American wine into the world. And I tell you that because in '81, as I was in that winery, I had a dream that I never wanted to leave the US. I went back home and said to my parents, I want to stay. My parents said, of course, this is a little early in your life. You're 11. So I was very fortunate to come back to Washington, D.C. for the French school, did my baccalaureate there, and never wanted to leave, and came back for graduate school. And that gave us what I wish every one of us in France, and our excellence alluded to it, as well as all our great speakers, is about the goosebumps we get, the emotions we get, the aspiration and inspiration we get as being in America at an early age, that we never want to leave again, because we want that communicative love and passion to be there. And I was very fortunate to live that moment, to the point that if you go back into the wine history, beyond the American Wine Foundation in 1976, and all of us celebrating the incredible bicentennial of the birth of the US, we lived a very unique event in the history of wine in 1976. Does anyone remember 1976, the famous Judgment of Paris? And that was really pivotal in the history of wine, and that really brought a very well-deserved country in the world to become on the forefront. It was a blind tasting organized in Paris with the top specialists enjoying fine wines and comparing blindly who is the best. And why I'm very proud to tell you that story today, because I've always believed, always, in the amazing luxury potential of America in food, in wine. And in 1976, I was 7 years old, reading in between the lines of the paper and witnessing obscure vintners of Napa Valley winning the gold medal and putting, for once, the French on their knees. And why it was important is because it allowed us as French to learn the first basis of humility. You've said that earlier. And I think it's always important that we have that sense of humility, because we deal in luxury products in the sense of emotion, sense of passion. And at the same time, it helped the world to really discover American wines and put American wines on the world map. And that was, I think, a pivotal role. In that honor, I was very pleased, as I had the pleasure to meet my wife, and always thought our world should eventually be together. Always believed that the complement of our two cultures makes sense. So for the first time in the history, we created a wine in 2010 vintage. So all of you need to get a bottle of this, because this is the symbol of our love. This is the symbol of our friendship. The first ever time we blended Burgundy wines, Gevrey-Chambertin, Nuit Saint-Georges, and 3 key vineyards in Sonoma together to create the Alliance Royale, so to speak. And what we did is we brought the wines to California, and we brought the absolute fruit, exuberance, and flamboyance of California with the earthiness and the depth of Burgundy. And we created a wine in honor of our daughters, Gina and I, Honoree Josephine and Grace Antoinette, and to create the symbol of the union of two countries, not only who can work together, but at the same time, who can create a spectacular wine together. And that obviously, needless to say, makes me think of the great words of a great man who we all admired, was Lafayette, who said, "Here we are," and Pershing, who said, "Here am I." And I'm very glad tonight, obviously, because my love throughout my life has been obviously punctuated through the friendship, the passion, the emotions of the art de vivre à la française, and at the same time the American way of life. And the symbol of those two is so important and always brings me to the conclusion of the fact that ocean may separate us, but ultimately wines brings us together. Merci beaucoup.